For this video, we're going to be doing your rib exams. We have several projections to go through for this exam. There's actually 6 projections. You would never be doing all 6 of these on a patient. We would only be doing 3 at a time, either the PA projections all together or the AP projections all together. So we're going to keep that in mind as we go through the video. I'm going to start with all the PA projections, and then we're going to move on to all the AP projections. In your practical, you'll be choosing if your patient has pain in the front or the back, and that will give you the cue as to whether you need to do your exam PA or AP. If the patient is having pain in the front, we want that closest to the IR so that we can see it the best and have the best detail there. So we would be doing the entire exam PA. If their pain is in the back, we want that closest to the IR, so we would be doing the projections AP. So that's what will make up your decision as to whether you are going to do one or the other exams. We're going to demonstrate all 6 projections, and then for the demonstration video, you guys will see what it would be like when you only have 3 to perform for us for your practical. So we're going to start with the PA, as I said. We're going to be using a 14x17 IR, and we're going to be using it in the lengthwise orientation. We'll be in the bucky for these. Also, our SID is changing from our chest exam. We're going to be much closer this time to get a little bit more detail. We're going to be pulling in our SID to 40 inches for this. So I'm going to get my tube in D10. There we are. Okay. Now, since we're going to be starting with PA, I'm going to have Mrs. Skaggs turn around and place her chest up against the board. Next, I'm going to turn my light on, and I'm going to look for my centering landmark, which is T7. How I'm going to find that on her, since you can't really feel any of the spine indicators past about C7, where you have that big notch on your back, I'm going to look for her scapula, and I'm going to follow it all the way around to the base of her scapula. That is my T7 indicator. Some people it can be hard to find, and in that case, you can have them kind of roll their shoulder forward or even move their shoulder back and forth until you feel it, and then you can trace it down. So once you've found that, you know that's exactly where you need to center. As you can see, when I pulled in here, I'm a little bit high, so I'm going to lower down. Again, for this excuse me, projection, we're centering right on the MSP, right in the center of her spine. Another way I can check to be sure I'm in the right position is by opening my bucky and looking at my image receptor. It's 1.5 inches above her shoulder, so I'm checking that, and I know I'm in a good position. So I'm going to collimate here to my cassette. Make sure, oh, and look, I'm not quite at the right height here with my bucky. I can see my lights a little bit there, so I'm going to let her know I'm moving this because it'll surprise her. Tell her I'm moving this up, and I'll raise it up until it lines up with the notch here on my bucky tray. All right, so now I'm at the correct height with my bucky. I'm collimated. I'm going to have her, again, roll her shoulders forward to get those scapula out of the way of the ribs that we're looking at. And then we can give her the breathing instructions that we want. So we're going to have her take in a deep breath and hold her breath in so that we get a good inspiration and plenty of air in those lungs so that we can visualize the ribs very well. Again, for this, since we have Mrs. Skaggs here as the patient, I would have her shielded to protect her from this radiation. For the next projection, I am going to put her at an angle so that I can get a couple more views of her ribs. We have 2 different angles that we do when the patient is PA. Those positions are called RAO and LAO. Those positions refer to the way that the person's body is positioned, not the way that the x-ray is traveling, because as we mentioned, we're doing projections that are PA, but these positions that the patients are in are called LAO and RAO. So with LAO, that means that my patient is going to have their left shoulder, L, closer to the image receptor. And their anterior left shoulder is going to be against the image receptor. That's why it's called LAO. So I want her at a 45-degree angle, and I can achieve this kind of by turning her until I see that angle happening between my bucky and her body. I want to look at the whole plane of her body, not just this shoulder. Look at the entire way that her body is turned. If you have a hard time visualizing angles, sometimes it can help to use a positioning aid. We have sponges in here that are at 45 that you guys can use to practice until you can visualize it better. When I was a student, I used my elbow a lot to help me in positioning, because that could put you at a pretty good 45-degree angle, and I'll show you that a little bit later. But for this LAO projection, since I've already centered to T7 for that PA chest, essentially, but it was PA ribs, I don't need to move my tube or my bucky now in any up or down positioning, because I've already matched it to her height. So all I need to do now is match it to this side that we're looking at. In this LAO position, I'm going to be looking, let's say she's got pain on her left side. I'm going to be looking at her left side. So I'm going to scoop her to her right and position the center of my collimation between her spine and the lateral border of her body, so that I can get a really good look at just this left side of her. So I'm going to scoot her forward just a smidge more. Now I'm between those two spots. And I can collimate in now so that I don't have all this light out here and I don't have all this over here. I just am looking at her ribs, so I will collimate down. I want to still see some spine in there, so I want to make sure that I don't cone in too close, but I also don't want all that light out here either. I want to be nice and close. In order to get her arm out of the way, because as you can see we've got light on her arm here and I don't need a picture of that, I would have her raise her arm out of the way. Again, oh, and I didn't even mention that, but we're always going to be using markers. On that first projection, you can mark either right or left. You have both of them on there. Oh, I need to get some tape on my markers too. But for this projection, since we're just looking at the left ribs, I'll just be marking that left side so that we know which one it is. Now for this projection, when we're getting ready to take this, again, she'll be doing a full inspiration for me and holding her breath. And then we can expose and she can breathe. So we're continuing to look at this left side. This is where her pain is, but I'm going to get another view of it. Sometimes it can be hard to see fractures that are on the lateral border of our ribs. So we do both of these oblique projections because we can't do a lateral or everything would be all matched up together and superimposed. So we do these two oblique images so we can get a better view. So what I'm going to have her do for this one, which is called RAO, is I'll have her angle the other way. We'll put that right anterior shoulder close and we'll get a 45-degree angle. As I mentioned, I used to use my elbow sometimes as a student. I know that if I put my humerus right up against this bucky and I lean her body in, that will put her at a 45. So if you guys are having trouble with your angles, that might help you too. So once I know I've got her at a 45, now I can manipulate everything. Again, even though the patient has turned, I'm still looking at the left side of her. So I want to make sure I'm centering on that side. As she's moved and turned, she's no longer right in the center. So I'm going to again scoot her over to the right, to her right, to my right now too. And this time, when I'm looking at my centering, I can see that my collimation I had before isn't open wide enough, because now that I've got her angled this direction, I need to see more. So I've got to, I can leave everything top to bottom like we said. Her height hasn't changed between these projections, but I need to open up more in order to get all the way out to the lateral border of her ribs and all the way out to her spine. This is a little bit more of an elongated view, so I have to open my collimator a little bit more. I'll be sure to mark this as well, hopefully. And again, we'll be doing the same breathing instructions of the deep breath in and having them hold their breath. So those are your PA projections for ribs. If you were going to be doing the opposite item and you were going to be doing, thanks, AP for ribs, your patient for this first projection, when we do both sides, the AP projection, she would have her back flat up against here. And we're going to do a similar thing that we did for AP chest. I'm going to look to make sure that my IR is 1.5 inches above her shoulders. Since we've already been working at with Mrs. Skaggs as our patient, I know it's already in the right spot. But if I had just chosen this series, the AP series, and I was getting ready, that is what the first thing I would look for. So now that we've got her AP, I'm going to kind of check my collimation here. Probably going to leave it all the way open right now for this, maybe just top to bottom a little bit, because I just want to make sure I get all her ribs in there from side to side. I'm going to mark this with my right marker only because my left seems to not be sticking. But you can mark either side. And again, I want to make sure that her shoulders are, or scapula are out of the rib margin, so I'm going to again have her roll her shoulders forward, even though she's standing forward. You know what? Can you bring them up for me? There we go. Hopefully that will get them really out of the way for us. And we're centering right down the middle of her, and we're going to be shielding her for all of these as well. So this is the same breathing instructions too. We want her to take in a deep breath and hold her breath. For the next two projections we do in this AP direction, these are called LPO and RPO because the same reason. So if we start with this RPO, I'm going to put her right posterior shoulder up against the IR, and then I'm going to just angle her to 45. And this time, let's say her right ribs are hurting. So we're going to focus on this side that's closest to me, her right side. Again, I'm going to look at her spine and the lateral border of her and try to get her right in the middle. So I'm going to scoot her back a little bit and try to make sure that my centering line is right between those two areas. I'm going to collimate down because again, I have so much light over here and so much light over there. So we're going to bring that in here. And again, I don't need to adjust top to bottom because we've got her height down already. But I am going to try to get that arm out of the way for us. And have her take in a deep breath and hold her breath. Very good. Now this last position is the LPO position. And that means we're going to have her left posterior shoulder up against this bucky. So now that we've got her like that, she's turned a little bit much. I'm going to lean her back a little bit to get her 45. We're still looking at this right side of her. So I'm going to scoot her forward, making sure that I'm now getting between the spine and the lateral border of her. Once again, I see that my collimation from the previous projection is too tight, so I'm going to open it side to side. And then I'm going to have her bring this arm, probably let's just bring it right on up again for us. Here we go. All right, my marker on here, hopefully. And I'll have her take in a deep breath and hold her breath again. Good. All right, so those are our 6 projections that we're doing for ribs. Again, you'll only be responsible to be doing 3 out of those 6 for your practical, which is what we will demonstrate for you in the next video.